The greatest glory in living lies not in never falling, but in rising every time we fall. This quote from Nelson Mandela is very close to my heart. Why? 'Cause my life is a story of falling and rising again and again. I know you are here because you want to learn something new. Maybe you want to learn English, or maybe you want to change your life. I want to tell you my story. It's a story about love, betrayal, failure, and success. I promise if you listen to my story, you will feel stronger and more confident. But let me warn you, this is not a happy story from the beginning. I fell many times. I cried. I lost my job. Someone I trusted betrayed me. But today I am here smiling and talking to you because I learned how to stand up after every fall. Do you want to know how? Let me take you to the beginning of my story. It was a time when I was full of dreams and believed the world was perfect. But life taught me some hard lessons. Stay with me because this story might change your life too. Let's begin. I always had big dreams. Since I was a little girl, I wanted to be a fashion designer. I loved drawing dresses, picking colors, and creating new styles. I dreamed of seeing my designs on the runway in Paris, Milan, and New York. When I turned 23, I finally got a job at a fashion company in my city. It was small, but it was a start. I was excited and worked very hard. My boss liked my creativity, and I began to believe that my dream was getting closer. One day during a work meeting, I met David. He was tall, charming, and confident. David worked in marketing, and he had a way of making everyone feel special. He smiled at me and said, "Lisa, your designs are amazing. You are going to be a star one day." His words made me feel proud and happy. No one had ever believed in me like that before. David and I started spending time together. We went for coffee after work, talked about our dreams, and laughed a lot. He always said, "Lisa, I'll help you achieve your dreams. You have so much talent and the world needs to see it." I fell in love with him. He made me feel like I was not alone in my journey. With David by my side, I worked harder than ever. My designs started getting noticed. My boss gave me more responsibilities, and soon I was working on big projects. For the first time, I felt like everything in my life was perfect. But then things started to change. One evening, I was working late at the office. I needed a file, so I opened David's drawer to look for it. That's when I saw something shocking. It was an email David had sent to my boss. In the email, he wrote, "Lisa's designs are not good enough. I think she's not ready for bigger projects." My hands were shaking as I read those words. How could David, the person who supported me and said he believed in me, do this? I didn't know what to do. The next day I tried to talk to him, but he acted like nothing happened. He smiled and said, "Lisa, you look tired. Are you okay?" His words felt fake, like he was hiding something. I began to notice more things. David was always too friendly with my boss, always giving ideas about how the company should work. Slowly, I realized the truth. David didn't love me. He used our relationship to get closer to my boss and improve his own position in the company. After finding David's email, I felt uneasy about everything. It wasn't just the email or his sudden closeness with my boss, Ms. Carter, that bothered me. It was something deeper, something I couldn't quite put into words. Ms. Carter was a confident, powerful woman. She was in her early 40s, always dressed elegantly and carried herself with grace. Everyone in the office admired her, including me. She was everything I wanted to be one day. But recently, I had noticed how David acted around her. David often spoke about Ms. Carter at home. "Lisa," he'd say, "Ms. Carter is so intelligent. She knows how to handle difficult situations. You could learn a lot from her." First, I thought he was just being supportive, encouraging me to grow in my career. But then there were moments that didn't feel right. I remembered one day in the office when I walked past Ms. Carter's office and saw David sitting across from her desk. He wasn't there for a meeting, it was lunchtime. They were laughing about something, and she leaned forward, resting her chin on her hand. David's smile was wide, and he looked so comfortable. When I walked in to ask him something, his smile faded. "Lisa, can we talk later?" "I'm busy," he said, waving me away. "Busy?" It didn't look like work to me. As days went by, I noticed more signs. David always volunteered to stay late when Ms. Carter needed help. He sent her messages late at night, and once, when his phone buzzed during dinner, I saw her name on the screen. When I asked him about it, he shrugged. "Lisa, don't be silly. Ms. Carter and I are just friends. She's helping me grow in my career." But something in his voice didn't feel honest. Then, one Friday evening, we had a team celebration at a rooftop bar. David was sitting with Ms. Carter most of the night, and I was with my colleagues at another table. I watched as he leaned closer to her, laughing at her jokes and touching her arm lightly. For the first time, I felt something I couldn't ignore, jealousy mixed with fear. The next day, I couldn't keep my feelings inside anymore. I asked David directly, "David, do you have feelings for Ms. Carter?" He looked surprised but not guilty. "Lisa, don't be ridiculous. You're overthinking again. Ms. Carter is my mentor. She believes in me just like I believe in you." But his words didn't comfort me. They made me feel worse. A few days later, I accidentally overheard a conversation in the hallway. Ms. Carter was talking to a colleague. She said, "David is such a hard worker. I enjoy his company, and he understands me better than most people." Her tone wasn't professional, it was personal. That evening, I couldn't stop myself. I checked David's phone while he was in the shower. My hands were shaking as I opened his messages with Ms. Carter. What I found broke me completely. They weren't explicit, but they were emotional, too emotional. He told her how much he admired her, how she inspired him, how he looked forward to their talks. And she replied with things like, "David, you make me feel appreciated, and you understand me so well." I sat there, frozen, the phone in my hand. This wasn't just about work. David had feelings for her, or maybe he was trying to get closer to her for his own benefit. Either way, I wasn't a part of his plans anymore. When David came out of the shower, I confronted him. "I read your messages with Ms. Carter," I said. He didn't deny it. He didn't even apologize. Instead, he said, "Lisa, I think you're misunderstanding the situation. Ms. Carter is helping me achieve my goals. Maybe you and I want different things now." Different things? We had talked about building a future together, supporting each other. But now he was saying it didn't matter. That was the moment I realized David didn't love me anymore, or maybe he never truly did. He cared about his career, about himself, and about Ms. Carter. I was just a step on his ladder to success. When he left that night, I felt like a part of me had died. I couldn't believe the person I loved, the person who promised to support me, had betrayed me like this. When David left, it felt like the walls of my life started crumbling one by one. His betrayal was a wound that wouldn't stop bleeding, but it was only the beginning of my descent into darkness. I couldn't focus at work anymore. Every corner of the office reminded me of him. His laughter echoing in the break room, his presence in meetings, even the small coffee mug he had once gifted me with the words, "Together, we'll conquer the world." Ms. Carter's cold, professional demeanor toward me grew sharper with every passing day. It was clear she favored David now, and I felt invisible. She started questioning my designs, rejecting ideas she once praised. The final blow came during a team meeting. "Lisa," Ms. Carter said in front of everyone, "your recent work has been disappointing. If you can't improve, I'm not sure this role is right for you anymore." The room went silent. My cheeks burned with humiliation. David sat there, looking down at his notes, not saying a word. He didn't defend me. He didn't even look at me. 2 weeks later, I was called into Ms. Carter's office. She didn't even bother to sugarcoat it. "Lisa, we've decided to let you go. Your performance hasn't met our expectations, and we believe it's best for both of us to move on." Move on? Where would I go? This job wasn't just a paycheck, it was my dream. Losing it felt like losing a piece of myself. I packed my things in silence, avoiding the sympathetic looks from my colleagues. I wanted to cry, to scream, but I held it in. Not here. Not in front of them. As I left the office for the last time, I glanced back and saw David standing near Miss Carter's door, talking to her. He didn't even notice me leaving. Without a job, I didn't know how to fill my days. I stayed in bed, staring at the ceiling, replaying every moment with David in my mind. The questions haunted me. Why wasn't I enough? Why did he choose her over me? What did I do wrong? My small apartment, once my sanctuary, became a prison. The walls seemed to close in on me, and the silence was unbearable. I stopped answering calls from friends. I didn't want to explain what had happened. I avoided mirrors because I couldn't bear to see the broken woman staring back at me. My once bright eyes were now dull, and my face looked pale and tired. I didn't recognize myself anymore. One night, as I sat on the floor of my living room, surrounded by empty takeout boxes and piles of untouched design sketches, I broke down completely. "I've lost everything," I whispered to myself. Tears streamed down my face as I thought about how far I had fallen. My career was over. My relationship was a lie. My future felt like an empty void. For weeks I lived like this, alone, broken, and lost. I didn't know how to move forward or if I even could. But in that darkness, something small began to stir. A voice inside me whispered, "This can't be the end, Lisa. You're stronger than this." It wasn't hope, not yet, but it was the faintest spark, a reminder that maybe, just maybe, I could find a way out of the darkness. In the weeks that followed, I continued with my life, not expecting anything extraordinary. I didn't have a grand plan or some big dream to chase anymore. My days were simple: eat, sleep, and occasionally browse job listings. Deep down, I still felt broken. But one quiet morning, as I sat on my couch scrolling through emails, something changed. I thought about how I had been living in fear of rejection, fear of failure, fear of being judged. David's betrayal had shattered my confidence, but it also left me with nothing to lose. For the first time, I realized that maybe, just maybe, this emptiness was my chance to rebuild. "What's the worst that can happen now?" I whispered to myself. I had already hit rock bottom. Losing a job? Being rejected? None of it seemed as terrifying anymore. With this new mindset, I decided to take a bold step. Instead of waiting for an opportunity to come to me, I would go out and create one. I made a list of all the companies I had once admired but never dared to approach. Some were local design studios. Others were major corporations whose names alone had intimidated me. I started by sending emails, simple but heartfelt messages expressing my skills, passion, and willingness to learn. I applied to every position I could find, from small freelance gigs to full-time roles in prestigious firms. First, there was silence. Weeks passed without a single response. But this time, I didn't let it discourage me. "Rejection doesn't define me," I kept telling myself. Then one day I received an email. It was from a mid-sized design agency inviting me for an interview. My heart raced. Interviews had always terrified me, but this time I approached it differently. I've already lost so much. What's one more rejection? I walked into the room with a confidence I didn't know I had. I answered their questions honestly, shared my ideas openly, and even admitted my failures. To my surprise, they didn't judge me. They admired my resilience and creativity. "Lisa," the interviewer said at the end, "we love your energy. You have the potential we're looking for." That one interview led to another and then another. Slowly, I began to see myself through the eyes of these interviewers, not as someone broken, but as someone strong, talented, and determined. I remember one particularly intimidating interview at a prestigious firm. Walking into their sleek office felt surreal. I sat across from a panel of accomplished professionals, people I once believed were out of my league. But instead of feeling small, I spoke with clarity and confidence. "We've reviewed your portfolio," one of them said, "and we're impressed. You have something unique to offer." For the first time in my life, I believed them. Of course, it wasn't all smooth sailing. Competition was fierce, and I faced my fair share of rejections. But each rejection taught me something new, sharpening my skills and strengthening my resolve. Every time I felt like giving up, I reminded myself of how far I had come. Pain of betrayal and the fear of failure had once held me back, but now they were my fuel. I realized that losing David and my job, as painful as it was, had given me the push I needed to aim higher. If I had stayed in that comfortable life, I might never have discovered my true potential. With every new opportunity, I felt more alive. I wasn't just rebuilding my career, I was rebuilding myself. Standing here today, I can finally say every setback, every heartbreak, and every failure was a lesson I needed to learn. It didn't feel like it at the time. Back then, it was just pain, raw and overwhelming. But now, looking back, I see how each moment shaped me into the person I am today. David hadn't betrayed me, I would have never realized how much of my worth I had tied to someone else. If I hadn't lost my job, I might have stayed in a role that didn't challenge me, settling for less than I deserved. And if I hadn't faced rejection after rejection, I wouldn't have learned the resilience I carry with me now. Each failure forced me to grow. Each disappointment made me dig deeper, work harder, and believe in myself a little more. To everyone listening to my story, I want you to remember something. Life isn't fair. It will knock you down, sometimes in ways you never expected. People you trust might let you down. Dreams you've worked for might crumble before your eyes. But here's the truth. These moments are not the end. Every heartbreak, every loss, and every failure is a chance to start again, stronger than before. I used to think that success was about never falling. But now I know it's about getting up every single time you do. When I finally stopped fearing failure, I opened doors I never even knew existed. I walked into rooms I thought were out of my league. I spoke with confidence I didn't know I had. And most importantly, I discovered a strength within myself that no one can ever take away. So, if you're in a dark place right now, I want you to hold on. Don't be afraid to start over. Don't let fear or heartbreak define your future. Remember, the hardest battles create the strongest warriors. And sometimes the life you thought was falling apart is actually making room for something greater. Months turned into years, and the life I once thought was ruined became a story of triumph. After countless interviews, I finally secured a position at one of the most prestigious design firms in the city. This wasn't just a job, it was a dream I hadn't even dared to dream before. The work was challenging, but it pushed me to my limits in the best way possible. I poured my heart into every project, staying late nights and working harder than I ever had before. And it paid off. My ideas began to stand out, and my designs caught the attention of some of the industry's top professionals. One of my campaigns even won an award, something I could have never imagined during those dark days of my life. What felt even better than the awards was the respect I earned. My colleagues valued my opinions and turned to me for advice. I wasn't invisible anymore. People saw my worth, not just for my work, but for my determination and resilience. One day, my manager called me into her office. I was nervous, thinking it might be about a mistake I had overlooked. Instead, she smiled and said, "Lisa, we've been watching you. Your growth here has been remarkable. We want to promote you to creative director." The words took my breath away. Me? A creative director? Felt surreal, but it was real. When I walked into my new office for the first time, I let the moment sink in. This wasn't just a personal achievement. It was proof that every tear, every sleepless night, and every rejection had been worth it. I celebrated with my closest friends and family, people who had stood by me during my darkest hours. We laughed, shared stories, and toasted to a future that once seemed impossible. But my story didn't end with my success. I started mentoring young designers, especially those who felt lost or unsure of their abilities. I wanted them to know that it was okay to fall, as long as they kept getting back up. One of my ments, a young woman named Claire, reminded me of myself. She was talented but doubted her worth. With encouragement and guidance, she flourished. Watching her succeed became one of the most rewarding parts of my journey. Today, I look back at my life not with regret, but with gratitude. David's betrayal and the loss of my job weren't the end of my story. They were just the beginning of a much greater one. To anyone going through tough times, I say this: don't let failure define you. Use it as fuel to build something extraordinary. The people who truly value you will see your worth, and the success you achieve will be greater than you ever imagined.